On July 13th, 2024, a highly contagious virus escaped from a top-secret laboratory. Within hours, it had spread to major cities around the world. But what would happen if this virus turned people into rage-filled, zombie-like creatures? Just like in the movie 28 Days Later. In this video, we're going to go through multiple scenarios on what would happen if a 28 Days Later style zombie apocalypse occurred. Now, I need to be clear that at the time of this recording, this is purely hypothetical, so some details may change if it ever actually happens. Another thing I want to make clear is that I don't wish ill will toward anyone. If you're new to the channel, you should know that we often look at fictional scenarios and give our hypothetical take on them. That's all that this is. In the movie 28 Days Later, the zombies aren't actually undead. They're living people infected with a rage virus that makes them incredibly aggressive and able to spread the infection through bodily fluids. Let's assume our hypothetical virus works the same way. So what would happen in the first few days? Unlike slow-moving traditional zombies, these infected individuals would be fast, strong, and relentless. Cities would fall quickly. The virus would spread exponentially, with each new infected person potentially creating dozens more. Governments would likely try to contain the outbreak, but given the speed of infection, they probably fail. We'd see martial law declared, travel bans implemented, and quarantine zones established, but it might be too little too late. Healthcare systems would be overwhelmed almost immediately. Hospitals would become infection hotspots as the infected sought treatment, unknowingly spreading the virus further. Now, what about the military response? Unlike traditional zombies, these infected can't be killed by conventional weapons. The military would likely be more effective in combating the threat. However, the sheer number of infected and the speed of the outbreak could still overwhelm even well-equipped forces. There's also the psychological factor to consider. Soldiers would be facing former civilians, maybe even friends and family. This could lead to hesitation and further spread of the infection. So what would happen to society? Well, it would collapse, and fast. Within days, most major cities would be overrun. Power grids would fail, water systems would stop working, and food distribution would cease. Survivors would need to quickly adapt to a world without modern conveniences. They'd need to learn to find food, purify water, and defend themselves. Those with survival skills would suddenly find themselves in high demand. But what about long-term survival? In 28 Days Later, the infected eventually die of starvation. If our hypothetical virus works the same way, survivors might just need to wait it out. But that wait could be long and dangerous. Safe zones might be established in remote areas or on islands, but these would need to be fiercely defended. Any breach could mean the end of the safe zone. Now let's consider the global impact. A virus that spreads this quickly would likely become a worldwide pandemic before anyone could stop it. We might see entire countries fall within weeks. International travel would cease. Borders would close. The global economy would collapse almost overnight. But what about finding a cure? In the chaos of the outbreak, organizing any kind of research effort would be incredibly difficult. Scientists would need safe, secure facilities to work, which would be hard to come by in a world overrun by the infected. Even if a cure were developed, distributing it would be a massive challenge. With infrastructure destroyed and most of the population infected, reaching survivors would be extremely difficult. Now let's consider some of the less obvious consequences of this apocalyptic scenario. Environmental impact would be significant. Without humans maintaining nuclear power plants, we could see multiple meltdowns around the world. Oil refineries and chemical plants left unattended could lead to massive pollution events. On the flip side, nature might begin to reclaim urban areas. We could see wildlife populations explode in the absence of human activity, leading to a rewilding of formerly developed areas. The psychological toll on survivors would be immense. Post-traumatic stress disorder would be nearly universal. The constant state of fear and the loss of loved ones would lead to widespread mental health issues. Cultural changes would be drastic. With survival being the primary concern, many aspects of modern culture might be lost. Art, music, and literature might take a backseat to more practical concerns. However, new forms of culture might emerge, centered around the shared experience of survival. So how would this end? There are a few possibilities. If the virus works like in 28 Days Later, the infected might eventually die out, leaving the survivors to rebuild. But this could take months or even years, during which time most of the world's population would be lost. Another possibility is that some people might be naturally immune. These individuals could become the key to developing a cure or vaccine. Or perhaps, like in many zombie stories, the survivors might need to carve out a new way of life in this changed world. Society as we know it would be gone, replaced by small, scattered communities of survivors. The rebuilding process, if it ever began, would be long and difficult. With most of the population gone and infrastructure in ruins, it could take centuries to return to anything resembling our current level of civilization. Now, this is not a fun hypothetical scenario. A 28 days later style outbreak would be catastrophic on a scale that's hard to imagine. It would fundamentally change our world and likely result in billions of deaths. Regardless of how you feel about zombie movies, this would be a terrifying time for everyone around the world. Let's just hope that if any rage-inducing viruses do exist, they stay safely contained in labs. I know I don't want to end up fighting off hordes of infected, but that sounds like a story for another what if. And speaking of other scenarios, what if this virus mutated? What if it started affecting animals too? Or what if it gave the infected some kind of heightened abilities? These are all terrifying possibilities that could make an already apocalyptic situation even worse. But those are stories for future what ifs.